Some marriages, like a tree that slowly rots from within, may appear strong on the outside, but are collapsing inside. Our story began in a similar way. Without warning, I started to notice that the trust we had built over the years was slowly eroding. Sarah and I had been married for 14 years. Our 2 daughters, Chloe and Ava, were the most precious things in our lives. From the outside, everything seemed quite ordinary. Life was a blur of routines, the kids, school, and the busyness of work. But one day, a question Sarah asked me made me realize just how deep of a crisis our marriage was in. After dinner that night, she quietly turned to me and asked, "David, have you ever missed going on a date with someone else?" It was like lightning struck my brain. I tried to understand the expression on Sarah's face. Was she joking, or was she serious? "No," I said, hesitant. "Why are you asking?" "I don't know," she replied. "I was just curious. I thought maybe we needed to spice up our relationship a bit." At that moment, something inside me began to break. We had never talked about anything like this before. There was something different in Sarah's gaze, but I couldn't quite figure out what it was. I closed the conversation without asking more, yet the echo of that question continued to ring in my head. What was on Sarah's mind? What did she mean? In the following weeks, Sarah's odd behavior persisted. Her erratic mood swings began to make me suspicious. One evening after dinner, while sitting next to me, she suddenly said, "David, I really think we need to add some excitement to our relationship." This time, there was seriousness in her eyes. "What do you mean?" I asked. Sarah responded, "We've become monotonous. We're holding ourselves back from trying new things. Maybe if we tried something different, it would be good for both of us." Truthfully, there was no problem with our sex life. We were intimate several times a week, and both of us seemed satisfied with that. But Sarah wanted more. I didn't resist her desires. We tried different positions, did things we had never done before. I have to admit, at first it was even fun. It brought a new excitement to our relationship. But soon, Sarah's demands started to push further. One day she turned to me and asked, "Why don't we try some role-playing?" At first, I thought it could be fun too. Sarah wanted to play different characters and reignite the spark between us. The first few times, I even enjoyed these games. But over time, I began to realize that I was losing the sense of reality in these roles. The games no longer had meaning, and everything seemed more about satisfying Sarah's desires. At one point, I had to stop and say, "This is getting ridiculous, Sarah." I noticed the disappointment on her face, but I let it go. However, this was just a sign of the deeper crisis our marriage was heading toward. The real issue, Sarah's true intentions, would reveal themselves one night soon after. One evening, while watching TV, she sat next to me and asked, "David, have you ever thought about going on a date with someone else?" That was the beginning of everything. Only later would I fully understand the truth beneath that question. Shortly after Sarah asked me that question, we were invited to our friend Angela's promotion party. When I learned the party would be held at one of the city's most popular nightclubs, I noticed how excited Sarah was. Normally, she didn't like attending such parties, but this time she was unusually eager. On the night of the party, Sarah was dressed elegantly. She looked stunning in her little black dress, but there was a distance between us that night. At one point, Sarah suddenly turned to me and said, "David, why don't you dance with Na?" Na was a friend from Sarah's workplace who was also at the party. At first, I found her suggestion strange. Normally, Sarah didn't like it when I danced with other women. "Why?" I asked. "Just for fun," she replied. There was a smile on her face, but it felt like she was planning something. As I danced with Na, I scanned the room for Sarah. At that moment, I saw her dancing with a young man. My heart sank. His hands were wrapped around Sarah's waist, and she was smiling up at him. When the dance ended, I left the party. I wanted to go home, but with every step, my anger grew. Sarah was openly flirting with another man, right in front of me. That night, I realized our marriage had reached a point of no return. When I got home, my mind was in turmoil. Seeing Sarah with another man had shaken me deeply. 14 years of marriage, 2 children, Everything we had built together felt like it was crumbling before my eyes. How could she so comfortably get close to another man right in front of me? Maybe she was testing me. Maybe this was part of her game. But that night, I didn't want to give her an answer to that test. I was tired, angry, and at the same time, helpless. I sat in the living room in silence for a while. After midnight, the door opened and Sarah quietly entered. Without looking at her, I asked, "Where were you?" But this time, her words didn't reach me. I looked at her one last time and said, "This marriage is over. We have our daughters. We need to handle this properly for their sake." Sarah fell silent. Regret was written all over her face, but it was too late. That night, I left her behind and moved to another room. A week later, I met with my lawyer and decided to start the divorce process. When I told Sarah the news, she broke down in tears. "Are you really going to do this? Do you really want to divorce me, David?" she asked. I looked at her and said, "Yes. This marriage is over. We need to do what's best for our daughters, but everything between us is finished." It was as if Sarah hadn't expected this response. She hadn't believed that I would actually leave her. "But I still love you," she protested, tears streaming down her face. But her emotional outburst no longer affected me. Our love had already been destroyed by Sarah's selfish desires. As we entered the divorce process, we had to explain things to our children. That was perhaps one of the hardest moments of my life. One evening, I gathered them in the living room. I was nervous, but I had to be honest with them. "Girls, your mother and I have decided to get a divorce," I said. The look of shock on Chloe's face, the tears in Ava's eyes. Neither of them had seen this coming. "What does that mean?" Chloe asked. "Why are you doing this? Everything was fine." I avoided giving them too many details. I simply said, "Sometimes people have disagreements, and it leads to this." I didn't want to mention Sarah's betrayal, but they understood. Chloe gave her mother a hard look and quietly went to her room. Ava, in tears, hugged me tightly. As Sarah packed her belongings from the house, she looked at me one last time and said, "I never imagined it would end like this." I looked back at her and said, "Neither did I, but it was your choices that brought us to this point." With regret in her eyes, Sarah left the house. I watched her go, knowing I would never see her again. With the support of my daughters, I stepped into a new life. Things wouldn't be the same, but this new chapter would begin to heal the wounds of the past. Over time, my daughters and I built a stronger family bond. Letting go of Sarah's betrayal wasn't easy, but we managed to move forward. There was a tense silence. Sarah hesitated for a moment before saying, "I just wanted to have some more fun." I looked at her. There was a faint fear in her eyes, but also a defiant look. "Fun?" I said sarcastically. "Was it fun? Did you enjoy dancing with someone else, his hands on you?" Sarah stayed silent for a moment. Then she said, "David, please don't overreact. It was just a dance. There's nothing to make a big deal about." I lost control at that moment. "Nothing to make a big deal about? You're flirting with another man right in front of me, and you call it fun? Is this what you meant by adding excitement to our relationship?" Sarah went on the defensive. "David, please, it was just a moment. Nothing happened. I just wanted to try something different for both of us." In the following days, I noticed a clear change in Sarah's behavior. She was more distant, colder toward me. One day, while Sarah was cooking in the kitchen, I saw a message pop up on her phone. It read, "Shall we meet tonight?" At that moment, I realized that our 14-year marriage had ended in betrayal. I didn't say anything to Sarah. Everything was becoming clear in my mind. I had to come up with a plan. I needed to uncover Sarah's betrayal. I was going to catch her. After that night, I began to closely monitor Sarah's movements. She stayed out late most nights and acted cheerful when she returned home. But by then, I knew what she was up to. One night, I checked her phone and found messages confirming that she had been meeting another man for a long time. The messages confirmed that she was having an affair with another man. The anger inside me was replaced by a deep silence. Now I knew the truth, and this was the turning point that would bring our marriage to an end. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I silently watched Sarah in the living room. She was once again engrossed in her phone, as usual, spending time texting. Taking a deep breath, I asked her to sit next to me. "We need to talk, Sarah," I said calmly. At first, she pretended not to understand, but the ease on her face slowly disappeared. "About what?" she asked. I noticed the fear creeping into her eyes. She knew the game was over. "I saw the messages on your phone," I said. "I know who you've been meeting. Every time I asked, you always came up with an excuse, but you can't hide the truth anymore, Sarah. This marriage is over." Sarah's face turned pale. "David, please, it's not that simple. You misunderstood," she murmured, but the nervousness in her voice betrayed the truth. "I had everything under control. I was just looking for some excitement. You know that I love you, David. It was just a moment, really."